Good.
So,
We won't wait for them.
so I think that introduces the kind of discussion around unicorn versus zebra. If you look at the global startup VC world, everybody's chasing that big $1 billion plus the unicorn. The challenge on the one hand with that is it's making a few people richer, as we know. On the other hand, what it's doing is we're bringing global competition into Africa to get the local organizations and corporates to start to have to move faster. There's always been a debate that Africa's 5-10 years behind the rest of the world. So with that in mind, how do we get the balance right to shift from an exclusive to an inclusive investor market? How do we get, we need funding to be able to facilitate the change, but how do we start to get the investors to drive a more purposeful, inclusive mindset and approach to funding?
Well, even if you just look at this framework that you put unicorn and zebra, and the bias here is let's create zebras, and then that bias that bias creates an inability to fund if you're looking for VCs that are comparing opportunities elsewhere that are unicorns and yours. And today, and this is a huge part of my book. Today, you have money printing trying to drive prices up, and you have technology trying to drive prices down. And technology is going to win in the end, but money printing is what people are doing. So in that environment, and by the way, that same environment is the wealth divide. So inflation is the same as wage deflation. So as you're driving prices, as you're trying to inflate and try to drive inflation, you're actually driving wages, and so you're driving society to the breaking point, and it's terrible. But in that environment, there's going to be capital pools that have tons of capital that are trying to, as well, beat a negative return of cash. And so they're investing in what they would see is the best way to do that. And so if your company doesn't have ambitions to be a big company, then you've taken out a whole bunch of investors. That doesn't mean you can't win. It doesn't mean you can't win, set up a profitable operation right away and everything else. But because of network effects primarily, companies can take winner take all markets. And the network effects make them stronger and stronger and stronger. That's why Google looks like Google. That's why Facebook. That's why these companies gain so much power, because the network gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So if you're competing against a company like that for capital, and you say I'm just going to be a small company, that it sends a signal to maybe that's not worth capital.
So that kind of comes to the next conversation around, we've engaged government you've spoken about, but we've engaged government who arguably should be driving the entrepreneurial state, if we use some of the other global economists, Mariana's book. We've engaged a lot of big business, we've engaged a lot of global business, but that mindset of short-termism and that linear versus the patient capital, the patient commitment to the medium longer term, which you need for the network effect. What are the things that you might have seen or you could advise us around dealing with this deception of the exponential, and how do we overcome that mindset and get that case a lot stronger?
So the business model has to be something that can change, that make an impact in the world, make an impact on people, make an impact in the world, first in probably a local market, and then that can expand from there. And then the team and the CEO and founders have to credibly deliver that message over and over and over again. And by credibly deliver that message, there has to be some sort of evidence. So you typically would raise a really small amount of money or none and prove a thesis. And then you would expand on that once you have evidence, and you would raise more money, and you'd raise more money. And somewhere along that curve, and by the way, a lot of companies, even with lots of money, go broke in that phase. If you look at WeWork or others, they're just bad business models. So it doesn't, just having capital doesn't mean it's a good business model and it'll work. It has to deliver tons of value that makes the network stronger to be able to have evidence that it's more and more and sustaining on the other side. So, but that all comes from a vision and really hard execution against that, and all the learning that comes along with that. And one of the things I look at it when I think about pitching to investors, that vision, every time, so most people won't understand it because you might be early and everything else, but every time you're pitching to an investor and they don't understand something, you have an opportunity to sharpen your pitch. So the more you do that, the more you practice that, the better you get at it. And you hear from investors who see everything. So those investors that see everything, they've seen other things like yours before and everything else. So the questions that they ask you will give you a sense of what they're thinking in times. So but that road is really, a lot of times it's a crazy vision. That I'll give you an example that goes directly to your chart here. Today, and one of the reasons China grew so fast is essentially for cheap labor, US exported their factories to China. And now China could produce cheaply, US had money, and it worked really well for a long time. And it became the production capacity of the world. Your chart here, that won't happen in the future. It'll look different. So if Africa tries to copy that model by having lower labor rates than China, it doesn't seem like a very good model when we have exponential technology like 3D printing that's getting better and better and better. And so now, what is a product in the first place? If you think about what a product is, it's just information in my head. Let's use a chair, for example, that I decide my chair is going to be better than everyone else's chair. And I take that chair and I take it to China to have it produced at scale. First a prototype. Will people buy my chair? Then at scale and shipping containers to ship it across into distribution, warehousing, and retail stores so people can buy my chair. And then I market against my chair. And I say to everybody, my chair is the best in the world. And every other person manufacturing chairs does the same thing against me, when it is just a piece of information in my head. How that information will look against 3D printing is within the next 10 years, maybe faster, there will be a Google for information and 3D printing. And it'll be, you'll print it in your home or down the street, and it'll be effectively free. And you'll have unlimited chairs or anything else, because it's just information sitting that's moving, and that entire supply chain of everything else is going to be removed. And so it creates an opportunity to create a crazy big business. I haven't heard anybody talking about a business like that yet. We might still be early. And so it might, but it's coming. So they're just an example to base on your chart. But most people wouldn't see that type of a example because they're so caught in the day-to-day of what it looks like today.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, it reminds me just to maybe give it a little bit more practical context in the current reality. There's a company called MX3D in Amsterdam that has robotic arms printing bridges that actually, you know, the robotic arm starts on the side of the river, and then it actually prints the bridge and develops across.
I've seen it.
Building the bridge. I'm sure you've seen it. Google it if you're watching and you haven't seen it. But over to Alistair.